Hello and welcome to the Schola Progenium. Today I'm going to be talking to you about an absolutely brutal tactic that has been really helpful to me over the past few years as I've developed it. And it's really helped me win a lot of battles with my Blood Angels and with all of the armies that I collect. And you can really incorporate this into most lists. And it's sort of a combination of a strategy and a sort of unit selection in your list, and also in many ways a battlefield ethos, if that makes sense. It's almost a battle philosophy, the Finger Four. Now, this tactic is actually something that was inspired by my love of history and my sort of obsession or addiction to watching history documentaries. And a few years ago, I was watching a documentary about World War II fighter pilots, and there was a tactic developed by the British originally called the box formation, where they effectively had four fighters flying in a box, a square or a rectangle, and they would mutually support each other. But then the American Air Force, or the United States Air Force, came along, and it developed this strategy into a really effective, flexible, and brutal attack formation that could be used to hit the opponent's air formations and just tear them apart. And it was really, really effective. And I was watching this documentary and I thought, how can I use this on the battlefield? Now, obviously, you just can't fighter pilots to 40K models. It's not going to work as a just natural transition. So it took me a while to develop these tactics. But after I got it right, it really started to help me win games. So I'm going to share these tactics with you today so you can incorporate it hopefully into your lists and your sort of battlefield philosophy and start using it to crush the enemies of the Emperor. So as usual, I'll break this video down into a couple of smaller sections. So the first section will be the sort of kind of units you want to be taking in your list and why you want to be taking them and how you want to be using them together. And then the second part will be more in-depth strategies and sort of things to be aware of when using this so that you don't sort of fall flat on your face. So without much further ado, let's get stuck in to the Finger Four. So to start us off, let's look at what we want to incorporate as units in this formation. Now, the first two units are going to be very killy units, and the second two units are going to be very tough units. And the killy units, if they die by the end of the battlefield, end of the battle, it really doesn't matter. The chief objective of these guys is just put out a ridiculous amount of damage whilst they're alive. Lots of wounds so they can take on hordes or massed infantry or, larger armies when you're outnumbered, and also really decent damage so they can take on tough elite units that you may be facing. Your other two units need to be very, very, very tough. They want to be sticking around for most of the battle, if not, the whole battle. And these guys, it's nice for them to have a high amount of damage output, but again, that's not essential. The key thing here is that these guys can keep up with the killer units and stay alive throughout. And altogether, this is going to cost you around 45 to 50% of your points for your army list in investment. So, you're committing to this. If you're not all in, but you're 50% in, 45 to 50% of your army needs to be spent on these four units. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples of some good units. In terms of killer units, you've got your big Death Company units. They can carry thunderhammers, they can carry power swords, and they can bring a lot of attacks with them. So they can kill both large numbers of infantry or large numbers of units, and they can also destroy really tough opponents. You've got your Sanguinary Guard, nice big chunks of Sanguinary Guard. I'm talking 7 to 9, maybe even 10 guys in a unit. A nice mix, maybe 3 or 4 of the Encarmine axes and the rest swords. And you then, with that combination, you're really going to be hacking through, again, large numbers of enemy models if you're outnumbered in the battle, or really tough elite units or tanks or knights, anything you want with those Sanguinary Guard. They'll destroy anything. So they're your killy units. But, as you know from Death Company and Sanguinary Guard in your own games, Sanguinary Guard don't have an invuln, and they're 2 wounds, which means they get absolutely murdered by overcharged plasma, melter shots, and just a whole host of, damage 2, damage 3 weaponry. Likewise, Death Company, that 6-up doesn't come in often enough against multi-damage weapons. It's never going to save you. You're never going to roll 2 6s, really. Once in a blue moon, it will save one guy, but really what's one guy in 12 to 14 guys, game after game after game? It's just not going to help you. So your Death Company, again, they're going to go in hard and then they're going to die. But your tough units, you can take units like Libby Dreads, because Libby Dreads, they can follow up. They can be just slightly behind these assaulting units, ready to get in and engage, but they can't be targeted because they're not the closest unit because they're a character below 10 wounds. So they're perfect as a really resilient, tough backup unit for this formation. Again, squads of Terminators, the obvious choice, absolutely brilliant, whether you want to go with Stormbolters and just normal Termies and Power Fists, or whether you want to go for the Assault version, Thunderhammer, Storm Shield, or Lightning Claws, whatever you may choose, a nice solid block of Termies or 2 is never going to do you wrong if you're going with the Finger 4 formation. For my personal choice, what I take is 12 Death Company. Those guys have 6 power weapons. It's 4 power swords and 2 Thunderhammers, which for me is A, the models that I've sort of accumulated over time, and B, a nice combination for me. I've got 9 Sanguinary Guard in there, and I'd use 3 Carmine Axes and 6 Carmine Blades, just because I want to maintain their ability to just hack through large numbers of units, but also get that damage on the tougher stuff, as I've said before. And then I take 1 of each type of Termi unit. Now, if one of these units gets wiped out or something like that, I'll just feed in a Thunderhammer Captain, or in lower points games, if I'm playing around 1,500 points, I will use a Smash Captain, Jetpack, Thunderhammer in place. He'll be an HQ and he'll also act in place of one of these 4 units because he's tough and killy. He can do either job, especially at a lower points grade, lower points level. He can perfectly fill in for one of these guys. So, those are the units that you want to be considering. And, if you don't collect Blood Angels, you really want to be sort of looking at the sort of general principles for those units that I've selected. You've got a large number of elite models in those units. They're not minimum 5-man squads of Sangard or minimum 5-man squads of Wolf. And for example, you want a decent amount, all rocking power weapons, ready to chop stuff up, and don't worry about spending too many points on Storm Shields or stuff like that. You want to spend those points on the tougher units and keeping them alive. So those are your principles for unit selection. Now, let's look at, just as an example of a non-Death Company unit, or a non-Blood Angels unit. I've got my Death Watch Finger 4 formation here. Now, my Death Watch Finger 4 works in a very similar principle, but the tough units can also put out a ridiculous amount of damage as well. So because these guys aren't getting into combat, I've adapted the tactics very slightly, but essentially it works in the same way. So here I've got 2 smaller squads of veterans. Each of those squads has 5 Stormbolters in it, and then 3 of the guys have power swords and 2 have storm shields. And one of those squads is supplemented by a Terminator with assault cannon. And they sit in the Corvus, ready to drop down. I then have 2 other larger units of frag cannons. Now, these are my really tough units, but they're also really killy, but they're insanely tough. I've got 3 frag cannons in one, and 4 frag cannons in another. Then in one squad, I have the 3 frag squad. I have 2 shotguns and a Stormbolter power sword, just to buff up the unit a little bit and fill out the numbers. I also have in both squads a veteran with a jump pack and storm shield, and a Terminator with storm shield and Thunderhammer, and another Terminator just to bring more 2-up saves if these guys are in the open, more invuns. These guys are really, really tough. And of course, my sergeants in each squad, one's got a shotgun and he's bringing a storm shield just for that extra resiliency. The other guy I've gone with a Xenophase blade and a combi melter, just because I like the guy and I find having that melter in there often, really helps me out. And these guys will teleport in and start shooting in at close range. So I drop these 4 units in together, and they work as a combined arms sort of formation to tear the opponent's lines apart by mutually supporting each other. So that's 2 examples of a sort of finger 4 formation that you can take in your army lists. So I'm going to move straight on to the strategy and how to use these guys in more detail so that you can really tear your opponent's lines apart. So how do we use these tactics? Well, first of all, you're going to combine these units into 2 pairs. And each pair is going to contain 1 killer unit and 1 tough unit. And then these pairs are going to work together in an attack to mutually support each other. And even if you're on the defense, these guys should be in an attacking stance. They should be fighting back. They should never be withdrawing, really. Now, the key thing here is this. Each individual unit in the pair must ensure that that pair maintains its momentum. But each pair must also maintain the other pair's momentum. Now, that sounds like a really complicated sentence, but I can break it down very simply for you. What I'm talking about here is momentum. That is the core of any good assault. Now, what do I mean by momentum? I mean that when you attack your opponent, after they have counterattacked you, you still have the capability to attack again. And after they counterattack you a second time, you still have the ability to attack a third time. So your attack doesn't fall short. You don't burn out of your assault units in 1 or 2 turns. Your assault just pushes and pushes and pushes till the end of the game, and presses your opponents that they can't take objectives. They can't stop you using your other units, your other 1,000 points or your other 750 points. They can't stop you using those points to take objectives and control the board because they're too busy dealing with the 50% of your army that's totally in their face, non-stop hitting them, punch after punch, blow after blow, short, quick blows. Now, that's the sort of ethos that these units want to maintain when they're maintaining their momentum. So how do they do this? Well, let's look at the first part of that sentence. Each individual unit in the pair ensures that the pair maintains its momentum. What that means is, let's say I take my first pair and it's a squad of Death Company and a squad of Terminators. Now, the squad of Death Company and the squad of Terminators will both deep strike in 9 inches away from the opponent. Now, with the Death Company, I'm going to use my stratagem 3d6 charge, and I'm going to get in, even if I have to use a command point reroll. My Terminators, I'm going to have a 9-inch charge. Now, I may get in. I'll probably use a command reroll to give it a good shot if I haven't already used it. But, if they don't get in, it really isn't a big deal. The Death Company will go to work and they'll wipe out masses of your opponent's lines. Your opponent will then counter-assault the Death Company. Now, whether that's in close combat or just a counter-assault by shooting them up is irrelevant, but they will really go to town on those Death Company. And, they'll kill a lot of them, maybe 10, maybe all of them if they get really lucky, but then the rest of your army will have gone untouched, let's face it. So let's say they kill almost all the Death Company. There's just 3 guys left in the squad out of 14, let's say you had. You've got a couple of Thunderhammers and a Power Sword left. Well, at that point, you've got your Terminators sat right there, ready to roll. And they will come in, and your opponent will, of course, have had to use units to do that damage to the Death Company. And those units will be now within danger of your Terminator squad and any surviving Death Company. And perhaps the Death Company are still maybe locked in combat with an enemy unit or something like that. The Terminators come in, they can free the Death Company from that combat because the Death Company can pull out, they can strafe them up and then assault them with Power Fists. If I'm using my my Thunderhammer Termies, they can run in, smash them up, whatever's tying up the Death Company with Thunderhammers, free them up, and the 2 units can move forward. If the Death Company aren't locked in combat and the enemies just run some units in to rapid fire them and really kill them, those Terminators will move up and just start attacking the units that were shooting at the Death Company. So these 2 units are sort of pepper potting now, sort of hopping over each other and sort of one punches, then the other punches, then one punches, then the other punches. So the enemy can't lock them down. They can't engage them. And any units that get too close get wiped out. And that's how each individual pair will be working on the battlefield. Now, the pairs don't have to be right next to each other. If you've got the supporting characters to do it, and depending on the opponent's deployment, these pairs could be on opposite ends. They could be two separate flanking attacks. Loads of Death Company and Termes on one side, loads of Sangard and a Librarian Dreadnought with Wings of Sanguinius, so we can keep up with them on the other side. And all your tactical Marines and whatever you've got, Storm Raven going up the middle. Who cares? It doesn't matter. But what these guys have to do is they have to maintain each other's momentum, even if they are separated on the battlefield, because that's the second part of this sentence. Each pair maintains the other's momentum. Well, how can they do that? Well, what you do is you need to use these pairs to threaten your opponent's lines, and you need to be aware of what your opponent will want to defend. Now, maybe that's a prized unit, maybe that's a newly painted unit, maybe that's his favoured unit, or maybe it's an objective that he's castled up on that he's really going to want to hold. So what you're going to do is you're going to put one of your units against that position or against that unit, one of your pairs, and engage it. They will then bring in support or rally their forces around that sort of objective or that valued unit or whatever, and they will start investing forces to protect it and to counter your assault, as I previously said. And then your other pair, your other two guys, your other two units, they're going to be targeting the units that are coming in to support the sort of double whammy going on wherever that is going on in the board. So not only are two units pushing an attack together, and any sort of individual unit that comes in to stop one of those units, the other one bullies and destroys, but any sort of larger concentration of forces in the sort of meta battlefield that start moving in to support one attack, you then target with your other pair. And, you're doing the same thing within that pair there, attacking one unit, then when the other unit tries to support it, you attack that unit and hopscotching, wiping them out. So here, your opponent finds himself in an absolutely relentless maelstrom of assault, where any time that he tries to prevent the assault or stall it in any way, he finds even more valued units being destroyed. Every time he seems to stop one unit in its tracks or gain some slight victory, another unit steps in and replaces it on the assault. Of course, as the game continues, as turns go on, you will, lose a couple of these units. And you may want to filter in other units into this attack formation so that you can keep pushing your attack and keep pushing in with your assault. Or you may just say, right, okay, I've lost two of the units. I've lost my Sangard and I've lost my Death Company. They've burnt out. It's turn 4 and they've just been assaulted, shot. They've done everything they could for me. And then you're just going to switch down to a single pair and you're just going to go against an opponent's, objective or whatever it is. And you're just going to, for the rest of the game, use that single pair, just mutually supporting each other. So it's up to you. It depends on the situation, what units you've got available, where the objectives are and that kind of thing. You'll either feed extra units in to maintain this formation as a 4-unit formation, or you'll just recombine into a single pair and just carry on doing what you're doing. It's up to you. Now, a couple of key pointers here, and these are sort of disadvantages, but can be, or it's a disadvantage, but can be turned into an advantage. And almost this is the way the list has evolved to work, or the formation within your list has evolved to work. And that is that you have to be aware that the only units that can use the 3d6 strategy to charge are jump pack units. And that, of course, you can only use this once per turn. Now, let's say you're dropping in both a Death Company unit and a Smash Captain, or a Death Company unit and some Sangard. Now, both of those units, they're going to be over 9 inches away. Only one of those units would be able to get in, guaranteed almost, and the other unit's going to be at risk. And not only that, but, you'd have to use your command point on that other unit, and that leaves your tough backup units almost definitely not going to make the charge. They've got no command point support, which sort of is really making both of your assaults, both of your pairs, sort of walk on a knife edge, so to speak, is quite risky. So my advice would be to bring in one jetpack assault unit by deep strike on turn 2 to get your assault in. 3d6, 9 inches away, bam, you're in. Then have the other unit either set up on the board if you think it can survive, or deep strike it in turn 3. Now, either way, it doesn't matter. If, let's say, you've got one of your killer units is a smash captain, you can have him deployed on the battlefield from the start. Now, easily, turn 1, he can move 12 inches and stay behind other units, a rhino, a vehicle, something like that. Then in the next turn, he's going to move forward another 12 inches, and then he's ready to assault. So he's crossed 24 inches. He's going to be well in range. He will not need a 3d6 charge to get in. So that sort of solved that problem, because you're going to drop your Death Company or your Sanguinary Guard in as one unit, and then simultaneously he will have moved up level from turn 1, and because he's a character below 10 wounds, he couldn't be targeted. That likewise works beautifully with a librarian with Wings of Sanguinius, as I previously mentioned. He can move up behind other units, then burst forward. He's got his 12-inch move, and you're ready to go. Another option is to deep strike, say, a unit of Sanguinary Guard in and have your Death Company. If you've got a really big unit and the opponent's not going to just destroy them with overwhelming firepower, if you think, if you're looking at your opponent's force and you think they can take it, you can always deploy them on the battlefield at the front of your deployment zone and then spend a command point before the game starts to move them 12 inches up. And then they can move 12 inches in your first turn and get an attack off. But that is risky business, but it can be done. So these are solutions to the problem of only being able to use the 3d6 stratagem once. And that 3d6 stratagem is really, really core in 8th edition to this formation working. Now, the coming in on 3rd turn works really nicely. If you're not using a smash captain as one of those 2 killer units going in, if you're using 2 big jetpack units, as I prefer to do, which is 9 Sanguinary Guard and 12 Death Company, if you're going more down that route, or maybe you're not, Blood Angels, and you've got a couple of big units of Vanguard veterans or whatever, Wolfen, who knows, what you're going to do is bring one unit in one turn and then the other unit in the next turn. And then what you're doing there is you are continuing with that sort of idea of having a relentless assault. So your one killer unit gets killed off or almost killed off, but your opponents really had to expose their forces to do that. And then what you do is you bring your other killer unit in. So when they've repositioned and exposed their forces to wipe out your first killer unit and take on your tough units, your second killer unit comes in and wipes those exposed forces out. And in a double whammy, you can take out most of your opponent's forces in a couple of turns. Quite legitimately, you can get yourself, close to tabling your opponent in a couple of turns just by having 2 big double whammies, one after the other. Punch, punch. And that's why it's nice to not necessarily have all your killer units coming in at once. There is a big advantage to having 1 killer unit and 2 tough units coming in. So you've got 1 full pair, and then the tough unit just sat there in amongst your other lines, just waiting for their killer unit to arrive. In turn 3, the other killer unit turns up. That tough unit's moved forward, and it's actually ready to get the guaranteed assault. So that second killer unit, even though it's coming in a turn later, that assault is going to be all the more powerful because it will be guaranteed to be reinforced by the tough unit that got there a turn before and got itself in the right position, prepared for this assault. So the last thing I'm going to say about the Finger 4 assault formation, as I call it, is this. Keep it loose. Don't worry too much about being really strict. As you saw earlier, my Death Watch don't really fit specifically into the tactics that I've described. They fit well into the tactics that I've described, and it's all about maintaining the momentum. But the formation of those units just fit the Death Watch army better and the models that I own better, quite simply. So they play in a slightly different way. And I use the 2 killer units together and the 2 tough units together. And you may well want to do this in your games, whether you're Blood Angels or any other force, and you fancy using the Finger 4. What you could do is have both killer units fighting together in an absolutely nasty assault on one part of your opponent's lines, and they'll kill almost everything in a table quarter, but then essentially be wiped out and be burnt out. And then have your really tough units combined together somewhere else in a position that your enemy just cannot shift once they've taken a position. Maybe use your 2 tough units, take a lightly defended objective and then just sit on it, and it cannot be taken back for love nor money, especially after your opponents had to invest so much in taking out that double combo killer unit pair and lost so many forces as a result. So all in all, keep it fast, keep it flexible, adapt these units' actions to maximize opportunity and take advantage of exposed enemy units. Relentlessly assault your opponent until the end of the game and use the rest of your forces to take control of the battlefield and secure the objectives for the Emperor. So this has been the Schola Progenium. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.